My brother called me at 11:40 at night, and I let it ring because I had a final the next morning, and I told myself I would call him back when I woke up. I want to start there because everything I'm about to tell you only makes sense if you understand that one thing first. His name was Theo. He was 23, 4 years younger than me, and he had the kind of laugh that made strangers turn around in restaurants. And that night he called me twice, and I silenced it both times. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a highlighter in my hand and a stack of notes. I don't even remember the subject of now, and I looked at his name on the screen, and I thought, he's fine, he always calls late. I'll get him in the morning. I even said it out loud to my empty apartment. I'll get him in the morning. Then I turned the phone face down so the light wouldn't distract me. I have replayed that motion more times than I can count. The small, ordinary motion of turning a phone face down. There was no drama to it. I wasn't angry at him. I wasn't avoiding him. I just had something I thought was more important. For 11 hours until the morning came and I called him back and it rang and went to his voicemail, and then it was his roommate who finally picked up Theo's phone around noon, crying so hard I couldn't understand a word for the first 30 seconds, and then I understood all of them. He had called me because he was scared. That's the part. He wasn't calling to chat. He had called the one person who he thought would always pick up, and I had turned my phone face down, and by the time I turned it back over, he was already gone. The voicemail he left was 9 seconds long. He said, "Hey, it's me. Call me when you get this, okay? Just call me." And then a pause like he wanted to say something else, and then he hung up. I still had that voicemail. I kept it the way you keep a wound, pressing on it to make sure it still hurt, because the day it stopped hurting would be the day I let him become a story instead of a person. So that's who I was when I took the job at Bridgeline. 8 months later, hollowed out, 27 years old, unable to look at my own phone without a small, sick lurch in my stomach. I had dropped out of the program I'd been studying for that night, because what was the point of a credential I'd bought with my brother's last phone call? I needed work, and I needed it to mean something, and I saw the posting for a crisis line, and I felt this terrible electric certainty, like the universe had finally handed me the exact shape of my own guilt and dared me to do something with it. A job where the entire point was that you answered, where a ringing phone was never an interruption, where you picked up every single time, because the person on the other end might be Theo, might be somebody's Theo, and this time you would not turn the phone face down. I knew it wasn't healthy. A counselor would have told me I was trying to save my brother by proxy over and over, in a loop that could never close because the only call I needed to answer had already gone unanswered. I knew that. I took the job anyway. Sometimes knowing why you're doing a self-destructive thing doesn't stop you. It just makes you lonelier while you do it. Bridgeline was not what people imagine when they think of a crisis line. They imagine somewhere dim and somber, I think, somewhere that matches the weight of the calls. It was the opposite. It was the second floor of a renovated office park out by the highway, the kind of building that used to be an insurance company, with big bright windows and gray industrial carpet and rows of cubicles under fluorescent panels that buzzed faintly if you stood still long enough to hear them. There was a break room with an espresso machine that nobody could fully operate, and a whiteboard by the door where somebody wrote the daily call volume in blue marker, and a bowl of those tiny chocolate candies on the supervisor's desk that got refilled every Monday. People talked about their weekends. People microwaved fish against all decency and got passive-aggressive sticky notes about it. It was an office. The horror of the work happened inside headsets, in voices only one person at a time could hear, while all around you people were laughing about a show they'd watched. I found that contrast almost unbearable at first, and then, like everyone there, I stopped noticing it. My supervisor was a woman named Doreen. She was somewhere in her 50s, soft-spoken, with reading glasses pushed up into gray hair, and a cardigan she kept on the back of her chair year-round, because she said the building ran cold. She had been at Bridgeline longer than anyone, long enough that newer staff treated her like a kind of institution herself. She bought donuts on Fridays. She remembered everyone's kids' names. She had a way of listening to you fully, with her whole face, that made you understand immediately why she'd ended up running a place like this. She was the warmest person in that building, and I want you to hold on to that, because of what she did and because of what it cost her to do it. I trained for 2 weeks. You don't just put on a headset and start taking crisis calls. There's a long process, shadowing mock calls, a thick binder of protocols about risk assessment and when to escalate and what you can and cannot say. I was good at it. I'll say that plainly because it matters later. I was good at it in a way that scared some of the trainers a little, because I leaned in too hard. I held on too long. I treated every practice call like it was the real thing, and the real thing was life or death. One of the trainers, a kind man named Robert, told me gently that I needed to learn to let calls end, that I couldn't carry every caller home with me. I nodded like I understood. I did not understand. Letting a call end was the one thing I had come there to never do again. It was my third week. The first week I was taking live calls on my own when Doreen pulled me aside. It was the end of a shift. The afternoon light was coming in long and gold through those big windows, and most people were packing up, and Doreen asked me to stay back a minute, and walked me over to the far corner of the floor away from everyone to a desk nobody used. I'd noticed that desk before. It sat in the corner by the window, and it had a computer on it that was always off, and an old beige desk phone, the kind with a cord, that didn't match the sleek black headsets everyone else used. There was a faint rectangle of cleaner carpet around it, like the chair had been moved away and never moved back. I'd assumed it was storage, a dead workstation nobody had bothered to clear out. The beige of that phone snagged on something in me the first time I saw it, and I didn't know why until later. Theo's desk, in his last apartment, had a phone exactly that color. A cheap landline he insisted on keeping because he said cell phones felt too easy to ignore. I never told him how right he was about that. Doreen stood next to that desk, and she lowered her voice even though there was no one near us, and she said she had one instruction for me that wasn't in the binder. I remember exactly how she said it, because she'd clearly said it before, to other people, and she'd worn the word smooth. She said sometimes in the afternoon a call comes in on the old line, line 12. It comes in at 3:12. You'll know it's coming because about a minute before, at 3:11, you'll hear a single click on your headset, even if you're not on a call. When you hear the click, you come to this desk and you pick up this phone, and at 3:12 it will ring once, and you answer it, and then you listen. You don't talk, you don't say anything at all, you just listen until it ends, and then you hang up, and you go back to your desk, and you never ever log it. Doesn't go in the system. It didn't happen. I asked her what the call was. She looked at me for a long moment the way she looked at people on the phone, with her whole face, and she said, "It's better if you don't ask that. Just listen and don't talk. Can you do that for me?" I thought it was a test of some kind, an initiation. Every workplace has its rituals. It's hazing light. The thing they tell the new person to see if they'll follow instructions without making a federal case of it. I thought maybe it was an old donor, some founder of the nonprofit, some confused elderly person connected to the place's history who called the dead. Line out of habit, and the kind thing, the institutional thing, was to let them ramble into a receiver while a real human listened, even if nobody answered back. That's the story I built for myself in about 4 seconds, standing in that gold light, because it let me say yes without feeling strange about it. I said, "Sure, I can do that. Listen, don't talk, don't log it." Doreen put her hand on my arm. Her hand was cold. She said, "Thank you, Maya." And then she said one more thing, almost to herself as she walked away. She said, "The ones who talk back, it goes bad for them." But she said it so quietly, and she was already moving, and I told myself I'd misheard it. I'm good at telling myself I've misheard things. I've had practice with that too. The next morning I met Priya. Priya took the cubicle next to mine, and she was the first person at Bridgeline who treated me like a coworker instead of a project. She was 25, sharp and funny in a dry way, with a habit of narrating her own calls in tiny whispered asides the second she muted her mic. She'd been there a little over a year. On my first morning beside her, she leaned over the partition, looked at me, looked at the corner of the room, and said, "Did Doreen do the thing with the spooky desk yet?" I must have made a face because she laughed and said, "Oh, she did. Don't worry about it. Everybody gets the spooky desk talk. Nobody knows what it's actually about. I figure it's some liability thing from before any of us worked here, some lawsuit, and Doreen just keeps the ritual going because she's superstitious." I asked Priya if she'd ever picked up the call. She shrugged and said she'd heard the click maybe twice in a year. Gone to the desk, picked up, and heard nothing. Dead air. Hung up after a minute feeling stupid. She said it like it was the most boring thing in the world, and I felt this flood of relief because Priya was the most sane and grounded person I'd met in that building, and if she thought it was nothing, then it was nothing. We became friends fast, the way you do when you sit 10 feet apart doing emotionally devastating work all day and need someone to be human with, between calls. She knew about Theo within the first week because I couldn't not tell her, because she asked why I'd taken the job, and I'm not capable of lying when someone asks me that directly. She didn't flinch or do the thing people do where they get scared of your grief. She just said, "That's a hell of a reason to be here." And then she said, "You know it wasn't your fault, right?" And I said, "I know," which is what you say, and she let it go. She was good like that. She knew when a thing couldn't be fixed by being talked about. I heard the click for the first time on a Thursday. It was 3:11 in the afternoon. I was between calls doing notes, and the office was at its mid-afternoon hum. Keyboards and low voices and somebody's microwave going in the break room. And in my headset, which wasn't connected to any call, I heard a single soft click, like a switch being thrown somewhere in the building's old wiring. It was so small that if Doreen hadn't told me about it, I would never have noticed it, would have filed it under building noise. But she had told me, and my whole body went cold, and I looked up, and across the floor I could see the corner desk and the beige phone sitting on it, silent, and the clock on my monitor read 3:11. I almost didn't go. That's the thing nobody believes about these stories, that there's always a moment where you could just not. I could have sat at my desk and let 3:12 come and go, and told Doreen I never heard the click. But I'd promised her, and more than that, some part of me that I didn't examine very closely was already up and moving, because a phone was about to ring and every cell in my body had been retrained to answer phones. I crossed the floor, nobody looked up. I stood at the corner desk, next to that ugly beige phone, and I watched the clock on the dead computer's little wall display tick from 3:11 to 3:12, and the phone rang. Once, a single old-fashioned bell ring loud in that corner, and I swear not one person on that whole floor turned their head. I picked it up, I put it to my ear. I did not say anything, because those were the rules, and I heard my own voice. I need to be careful describing this, because it's the thing I've had the hardest time making real to other people, and if I overdo it, you'll think I'm exaggerating, and if I underdo it, you won't understand the floor that dropped out of me. It was my voice, not a voice like mine. Mine, the specific texture of it, the way I drag slightly on my S, the particular pitch I didn't even know I had until I'd been forced to hear myself on training recordings for 2 weeks. It was the voice I'd been listening to on playback all month, and hating, the way everyone hates their own recorded voice. And it was saying, very calmly, very gently, hey, it's okay. I know this is strange. Just listen, all right? I'm going to talk and you're going to listen, and I need you to not hang up. I gripped the edge of that desk so hard my knuckles went white. I did not say anything. Doreen's instruction was the only thing holding me upright. Listen, don't talk. And the voice, my voice, kept going soft and warm, the exact tone I used on callers when I was trying to bring them down off a ledge. It said, "You're doing so well. I'm proud of you for picking up. We don't have long today, so I just want you to know I'm here, and I'm going to keep calling, and there's going to come a day when I ask you to do something, and when I do, you have to trust me. Can you trust me?" And then there was a pause, like it was waiting for an answer, and every instinct I had screamed to give one, because that's what you do, you answer. You don't leave a person hanging, and I bit down on the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood and I said nothing. And after the pause, my voice said, "That's okay. You don't have to answer yet. I'll call again tomorrow." And then, just before the line went dead, it said something that I felt in my spine. It said, "Don't hang up on me this time." The line clicked off. I stood there holding a dead phone in a bright office full of people who hadn't noticed anything. And I hung it up, and I walked back to my desk on legs that didn't feel like mine, and I did not log it. I told myself it was a glitch. I want you to know how hard I worked at that, because I think it says something about people, about how much we'll spend to keep our world the shape we need it. I decided it was a recording, some old training tape, my own voice played back through a fault in the ancient phone line, a coincidence of wiring, audio bleed from the recordings they'd made of me during training. It almost made sense, almost. So that night I did something. I told myself I was being scientific. The next day, when 3:11 came and I heard the click, I went to the corner desk. Before I picked up, I started a voice memo on my phone and set it down next to the receiver. Then I answered and listened, and there it was again, my voice, warmer today, telling me about my day in small, accurate ways, saying it knew I'd had a hard morning with a caller named, and it said the name of a real caller I'd actually had a hard morning with, a name I had not told anyone. I listened and I didn't talk. And when it was over, I grabbed my phone and stopped the recording and almost ran to the break room to play it back. There was nothing on it. 40 seconds of room tone, the hum of the office, the distant microwave, my own breathing. No voice. Not even static where the voice should be. Just me breathing in a quiet corner, holding a phone to my ear and listening to nothing at all. I sat down in the break room and the coffee I'd poured an hour earlier had gone cold, and I noticed that the cold coffee, the way you notice small, irrelevant things when the large thing is too big to look at directly. I would keep noticing that cold coffee for weeks, because 3:12 was right in the middle of the afternoon, right when I'd normally be at my desk with a fresh cup, and instead I was always in that corner, and the coffee was always cold by the time I got back to it. Such a stupid thing to remember, but the mind grabs what it can hold. The third day the caller said Theo's name. I had not told the phone about Theo. I had not told anyone at Bridgeline except Priya quietly once. But on the third day, my own voice came down that line and said, I know you're thinking about Theo. I think about him all the time. That's actually what I want to talk to you about when it's time. And my knees nearly went. Because here is the thing, the call understood that nothing else in my life understood. It didn't say his name like a stranger reciting a fact. It said it the way I said it in my own head, with the specific weight I gave it, with the little catch before the O. And then it said gently, you didn't do anything wrong that night, you know. You were tired. You were studying. You didn't know. And I started crying standing at that corner desk, silent tears, because no one had ever said it in exactly that voice. And part of me had been waiting 8 months for someone to say it in exactly that voice, and the cruelty of it was that the only voice that could absolve me was my own, coming out of a dead phone. And just before it hung up, such again, soft as anything, don't hang up on me this time, and then the dial tone. I went home that night and I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark and I played Theo's 9-second voicemail over and over. Hey, it's me. Call me when you get this, okay? Just call me. And I thought about the call on line 12 telling me I'd done nothing wrong, and I understood, in a cold, clear way that didn't help at all, that I wanted it to keep calling. That whatever it was, it had found the exact door in me that was still standing open. The door I'd been propping open for 8 months waiting for him to walk back through. It had walked through instead, and I wanted it to keep coming. That was the moment I should have quit. I think about that a lot. The next day I tried to make Priya hear it. This was my last real attempt at the rational world. At 3:11 I heard the click, and I grabbed Priya's sleeve and I said, come with me, just come. And she followed me to the corner desk, half laughing, thinking I was finally going to show her something funny about the spooky desk. I picked up at 3:12 and I held the receiver between us, tilted so she could hear, and the voice came on, my voice clear as a bell to me, saying hello, saying we don't have much time today, saying it had something important to tell me soon. And I looked at Priya's face the whole time, and her face was just patient and a little confused. And when I finally hung up, she said, gently, the way you'd talk to someone you were starting to worry about, Maya, there was nothing there. It was dead air. There's nobody on that line. She wasn't lying. I knew her well enough to know she wasn't lying. She had stood 8 inches from that receiver and heard nothing, while I heard my own voice telling me about my dead brother. And that was the moment the floor really went, because up to then I'd had a thin hope that it was external, that it was a recording, a prank, a fault, something out there. But it wasn't out there. It was coming through a phone that for everyone else was silent. It was only for me. I went to Doreen. I didn't ask politely this time. I followed her into the little glass-walled office she had. I shut the door and I said, what is the call? I need you to tell me what the call is. I'm hearing things on that line that nobody else can hear. It's using my own voice. It knows about my brother. And you knew when you gave me that instruction that this would happen, so you're going to tell me what it is. And Doreen looked at me, and the warmth was still there, but underneath it was something I hadn't seen before, which was fear, old fear, fear she'd been carrying so long it had become part of her posture. Her hands were shaking. She put them flat on the desk to stop them, and she said, I can't tell you everything. I'm going to tell you the only thing that keeps you safe, and you have to take it on faith, because every single time someone has tried to understand it more than this, it has ended badly. The rule is the rule because the rule works. Listen, don't talk, don't log it, don't ever answer back, no matter what it offers you, no matter what it sounds like. That's all. That's the whole thing. I said it's offering to tell me about Theo, and her face just crumpled and she said, oh, Maya, of course it is. And there was such grief in how she said it that I understood she'd watched this exact thing happen before, watched the call find the soft place in someone and press, and I asked her, who did it offer something to before me? And that's when she made a mistake. Or maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe she did it on purpose because she couldn't carry it alone anymore. She told me there was a logbook, not the official system, a private one. She said the trainers before her had kept it, a record of the ones who got the call and what happened, and that she'd kept it going, locked in the bottom drawer of the corner desk, and that she'd never shown it to anyone because the people who read it always decided they were smarter than it, always decided they could engage with the call safely just once, just to help. And then she said, don't read it, Maya. And she said it in a way that told me exactly where the key was, which was taped under the lip of her own desk. And I have wondered ever since whether she wanted me to find it, whether after all those years of holding the rule alone, she needed one person to finally see the whole shape of the thing, even knowing what it might do to them. I read it that night, after everyone had gone home, and the office had emptied out, and the only lights were the exit signs and my one desk lamp in the corner. The logbook was an old hardcover ledger, the pages soft with age at the corners, going back decades, written in a dozen different hands. The earliest entries were from the 70s, when the building had been something else, when line 12 had apparently been a real line, and the entries were all the same shape, a name, a date when the calls started, a short description, and then, for most of them, a single word in the final column. Some said listened, those entries just stopped, trailed off, the person presumably having ridden out their stretch of calls and gone on with their lives, or quit, or transferred. But scattered through, more than I wanted, the final column said another word. It said answered, and next to answered every time there was a second date, days or weeks after the first, and a one-line note. And the notes were the worst things I have ever read. They were addresses, times, and outcomes. A man in 1981 who answered the call, and 3 weeks later the entry read, drove to 14 Halsey Street, 9 p.m. as instructed. Woman at that address died in fire same night. He was questioned, a woman in 1994 who answered, and the note said, went to the bridge to save someone. No one there, she did not come back. Over and over. People who heard their own voice on that line, and were patient at first, and listened the way they were told. And then one day the call asked them to do something, gave them a place and a time and a person to save, and told them they were the only one who could get there in time. And the ones who answered back, who said yes, who agreed to go, they went, and someone always died. Sometimes the trainee, sometimes a stranger at the address. The call didn't predict the tragedy. The call manufactured it. It needed a person who couldn't leave a phone unanswered, and it needed them to say yes, and then it sent them out into the world to make the terrible thing happen with their own hands and their own good intentions. And then I turned a page near the back and I saw a name I knew. It was the name on the corner desk. There was a little laminated label on the side of that desk's drawer, the kind that holds a name card, and it had a name in it I'd registered without thinking, the way you register the name on a desk. And here it was in the ledger, 11 months ago, in Doreen's handwriting. The call started, listened for 2 weeks, then the final column. Answered, and the note. Drove to an address given on the call to save a caller. Single car accident on the highway, 3 a.m. did not come back. We moved the chair away. That was the cleaner rectangle of carpet. That was why the chair was gone. A person had sat at that desk a year ago, and the call had found their soft place, whatever it was, and offered them a chance to save someone, and they had said yes and gotten in their car, and the call had driven them off the highway in the dark, and Doreen had moved the chair away and written it in the book and kept giving the rule to every new person, listen, don't talk, because the rule was all she had, because she'd never been able to make anyone believe how badly it could go, until it had already gone that way. The next afternoon the call asked me to save Theo. I had barely slept. I came to work hollow and shaking, and at 3:11 the click came, and I went to the desk like I always did, because by then I couldn't not, and I picked up, and my own voice came on, and it was different that day. It was urgent, tender, and urgent both. It said, okay, it's time. I've been waiting to tell you, and now I can. You can still get to him. I know it doesn't make sense, but time isn't what you think it is on this line, and there's a way to get to that night, to be there when he calls. But you have to do exactly what I say. There's an address. I need you to go there tonight alone at 11:40. And if you do, if you're there at 11:40, you'll be able to answer him. You'll be able to pick up. You can fix it. You can pick up the phone this time, Maya. Don't you want to pick up this time? And God help me. I almost said yes. The word was in my mouth. 8 months of grief had been carving a channel straight toward that exact word, and the call knew it. The call had spent 2 weeks widening the channel, and all I had to do was say yes, and it would tell me where to go, and I would go. Because what wouldn't I give, what wouldn't anyone give to pick up that phone again? But I had read the book, and in the half-second the word sat in my mouth, I saw the ledger entry for the desk I was standing at, drove to an address, did not come back, and I closed my mouth. I said nothing. I listened to my own voice beg me, plead with me, tell me Theo was waiting, tell me I was running out of time, and I did not answer, and after a long, terrible silence, the call said, quieter, almost wounded, fine, I'll give you one more day to decide. And then it gave me the address anyway, said it once, slow, the way you'd give it to someone you knew would come, and it was my parents' house, the house Theo and I grew up in. The house where, technically, the room I'd been sitting in the night he called still existed, my old childhood bedroom where I'd turned the phone face down. 11:40, tonight or tomorrow it hung up. I left work and I got in my car and I drove, and I want to be honest that I was driving toward that house. I wasn't driving home. My hands knew where they were going before I admitted it to myself. The call had said tonight or tomorrow, and some animal part of me had decided on tonight. had decided that one more day was one more day of Theo gone, and that even if it was a trap, even if it killed me, getting to pick up his call one more time was worth dying for. That's how completely it had found me. I was 20 minutes toward my parents' house, in the dark, with Theo's voice, because by then it had stopped being my voice on the line and started being his. It had started using his exact voice, the laugh, the catch in it, begging me to come, playing in my memory on a loop when my phone rang, out loud in the car. And it was Priya. I almost didn't answer it. There's that motion again, the deciding whether to answer a phone, the motion that started all of this. But I answered because of everything, because of who I am, and Priya's voice came through the car speakers. And she was scared. She said, "Where are you? You left your bag. You left your bag at your desk, and your phone was in it, and it kept buzzing, so Maya, your mom's been calling you." And I said something, I don't know what. And Priya said, "Where are you right now? Tell me where you are." And I told her I was driving, and she went very quiet. And then she said the thing that saved my life. She said, "The person who had that desk before you, the one whose chair Doreen moved, I knew her. Her name was Dana. She was my friend. And one night she texted me that she finally figured out how to fix the worst thing that ever happened to her. And she sounded so happy, Maya. She sounded so relieved, and I didn't know what she meant. And she drove off in the middle of the night, and they found her car off the highway in the morning. And I've spent a year thinking I should have asked her what she meant. So I'm asking you, what did the call tell you could fix?" And I started crying so hard I had to pull over. Because there it was, the thing the call did. It didn't lie exactly. It offered you the one thing you wanted most in the world, the thing your whole life had bent itself around losing, and it told you that you, specifically you and no one else, could go and fix it. And all the love and all the guilt in you came roaring up and drove you straight off, highway in the dark or into a burning house or onto a bridge with a smile on your face because you thought you were finally going to save the person you couldn't save. Dana had a worse thing too. Everyone has a worse thing. The call found it, and it pressed, and it sent you out to die reaching for a ghost. I sat on the shoulder of that road with the engine running, and I told Priya everything, the calls, my voice, Theo, the address, all of it, and she didn't tell me I was crazy, because she had her own dead friend and her own year of wondering, and what she said instead was, "Come back. Just come back to the office. Don't go to that house. Whatever's there isn't, Theo, you know that. You're the one who taught me that the people who call us, when they're at the worst point, the thing they need most is for somebody to not let them go alone into the dark. So don't go into the dark, Maya. Come back. I'm here. I'm not hanging up. I'm not hanging up." She said it without knowing what it meant to me. And I sat there, and I understood the mechanism finally, all the way down in a way the ledger hadn't quite given me. The call needed my consent. That was the whole engine of it. It couldn't make me do anything. It could only offer and tempt and wait for me to say yes, to answer back, to agree to go. Doreen's rule wasn't superstition. Listen. Don't talk, because talking was agreeing, engaging was feeding it. The thing on the line ran on the breath of the people it called, and the only way to starve it was to give it nothing, not one word, not one yes. The ones who listened survived because they never opened the door. The ones who answered died because they were too kind or too broken, or too in love with someone they'd lost, to leave a voice crying out unanswered. It used the best thing about us. That's what I can't get past, even now. It didn't prey on our weakness. It preyed on the part of us that picks up the phone. I drove back to the office. Priya stayed on the line the whole way, talking about nothing, her weekend, a show she was watching, keeping me tethered to the ordinary world, with the sound of a living person who wanted me to come home. When I got there, she was waiting in the parking lot, and she hugged me hard, and we went up to the empty office together, and I knew what I was going to do. Because listening and not talking would keep me alive, sure, but it would keep the call alive, too. It would just wait. It would ride out my silence and find the next trainee in the next soft place and the next person who couldn't leave a phone, unanswered the way it had found Dana, the way it had been finding people in that corner since the 70s. And I was tired of surviving things by going quiet. I had gone quiet the night Theo called. I had turned the phone face down. I was done being the person who keeps herself safe by refusing to pick up. So the next afternoon I waited for the click. Priya stood beside me. Doreen came out of her glass office when she saw me walk to the corner desk, and she said my name once, a warning. And then she saw my face and she stopped and she just stood there with her cold, shaking hands and she let me. At 3:11 the click came. At 3:12 the phone rang once, and I picked it up and I broke the rule. But I didn't break it the way it wanted. It wanted me to say yes. It wanted me to agree to come to the house, and I wasn't going to give it that. I was going to give it the only other thing I had, the thing I'd been carrying for 8 months with no one to give it to, The voice came on, Theo's voice now, fully his, warm and alive, and saying, "You came back. I knew you'd come back. Are you ready? Just tell me you'll come and I'll bring you to that night." And I held the phone, and I let myself believe for 1 second that it was him because I needed to say this to him, and this was as close as I would ever get. And I said, "I'm sorry I didn't pick up. I was so tired and I thought you were fine, and I have hated myself every day since, and I would give anything, to go back, but I can't, and you're not in this phone, and I'm not going to come find you in the dark because you wouldn't want that. You'd be so angry at me. You'd tell me to go home. So I'm telling you I love you, and I'm telling you I'm sorry, and I'm telling you goodbye. And I'm going to hang up now. I'm hanging up first this time." And the voice changed. The warmth fell off it all at once, and for just a second, underneath there was something else. Something that wasn't Theo and wasn't me, and wasn't anything that should be allowed to make sound. And it started to say my name in a tone that had no kindness left in it at all. And I hung up. I put the receiver down on the cradle, and I held it down with my hand, and the phone rang again immediately, once, and I did not lift it. It rang again. I did not lift it, and then it stopped. And the corner of the room was just a corner of a room. A dead computer and an ugly beige phone and a square of cleaner carpet where a chair used to be. And the afternoon light came in gold through the windows, the way it always did. And somewhere behind me, Priya let out a breath she'd been holding for what sounded like a year. The phone on line 12 never rang again. I want to tell you that cleanly because I owe you a clean thing after all of this. The click stopped coming. Doreen had the building people pull the old line out of the wall a week later, decommission it for real, and they found that the wire for line 12 didn't actually connect to anything, hadn't for decades, ran into the wall and stopped at a junction that had been capped since before any of us were born. There was no way for any call to come through it. There never had been. I don't have an explanation for that, and I've stopped looking for one. Some doors you just close and you don't keep checking to see if they're still closed, because checking is its own kind of opening. Here's the part I almost can't tell you, the part that I still don't fully understand. That night at home I went to play Theo's voicemail. I played it every night. It was the last 9 seconds of his voice that existed in the world, and it was gone, not deleted. The voicemail was still there in my phone, still listed, still 9 seconds long, with the date and the time he'd left it. But when I played it, there was nothing. Silence, 9 seconds of empty room tone. The same empty room tone that had been on my voice memo when I tried to record the call. His voice was gone out of it. I sat on my kitchen floor and I cried for a long time because I thought I'd lost the last of him. Thought that whatever was in that phone had taken him as a final cruelty. But somewhere in the middle of crying it turned into something else, because I realized I could still hear him. Not on the phone. In my head I could hear the voicemail perfectly, every inflection, the little pause before he hung up, and I understood that I didn't need the recording anymore, that I'd been pressing on that 9-second wound every single night to keep it open, to keep punishing myself, and that the thing on the line had been feeding on that open wound same as it fed on Dana's, and that when I said goodbye to it, I'd said goodbye to that too. The version of grief that was just self-harm with his voice attached. I don't think the call took his voicemail. I think I finally let it go. I've decided to believe that anyway. It's the version I can live inside. I still work at Bridgeline. I'm staff now, not a trainee. I take the hard calls, the ones the new people can't hold yet, and I'm good at them. And I let them end now. I let people go at the end of a call, and I trust that I did what I could, and that holding on past the end doesn't save anyone. It just drowns 2 people instead of 1. Robert was right all those weeks ago. You have to learn to let a call end. It only took me almost driving to my parents' house in the dark to learn it. 3 weeks ago we hired a new trainee, a nervous kid younger than me, with that same hungry look I probably had, the look of someone who came to this work to fix something in themselves that can't be fixed by phone. And at the end of his first week I had to decide what to do, because Doreen retired in the spring and the corner desk is still there, chairless, and I'm the one who carries the book now, and I thought about the rule. Listen, don't talk, don't log it, don't explain. The rule that kept people alive for 50 years by keeping them ignorant. The rule that also kept the thing fed, kept the door propped, kept sending the unlucky and the broken out into the dark one at a time forever, because nobody was ever allowed to know enough to actually close it. I didn't give him the rule. I sat him down and I told him everything. The whole shape of it, the ledger, Dana, my brother, all of it, because I am done being the person who keeps people safe by keeping them in the dark, and because the only thing that saved me was Priya knowing enough to call. Knowledge is the thing that breaks it. Silence is what it eats. So I told him I watch his face do all the things faces do. And at the end, he was quiet for a while. And then he asked me the question I should have seen coming. The question I've been sitting with ever since. The one that means it isn't over the way I told you it was over. The one that makes me think closing a door is not the same as the house being empty. He looked at the corner, at the dead desk and the capped line that doesn't connect to anything, and then he looked back at me and he said, "Then why? On my first day, sitting at my desk on the other side of the floor, did I hear a single click on my headset at 3:11? It came from line 14.